All right, welcome to our Standing for Truth Ministries full ministry walkthrough. And I'm going to get right into it as I have quite a bit to get through. This will be a two-part video. And what I mean by that is the first part of this program will be a full walkthrough of the Standing for Truth Ministries here. And then the second part will be a short rebuttal to evolutionist, guardian of common descent, Dr. Stefan Frello. And he continues to repeat arguments that have been engaged, they've been debunked, they've been addressed. It shows that the guardians of common descent, they are running out, or they have completely run out of arguments, talking points, and rescue devices. And it's not really his fault. It's not their fault. It's just that there's not really good convincing evidence for this idea that whales, banana plants, humans, and chimpanzees are related through common ancestry. It is a great time to be a biblical creationist. We've demonstrated that over and over again. But January and moving into February, as we are in February right now, we've got a ton of excellent content upholding the truth of biblical creation. And we are going to continue addressing the critics, engaging their challenges, debunking their objections. And so let's start with our Team Standing for Truth walkthrough. Now, why I want to do this is because we have endless content. We have extensive material on all things creation, evolution, ancestry, and origins, but also topics like the nature of God, soteriology, which is the study of the doctrines of salvation, eschatology, which is the study of last days, and theology in general, and Christian apologetics. And so I do get a lot of questions that come in and comments, which is good. We like questions, we like comments, and we like answering your questions. We want to leave no stone unturned as a ministry. So not only do we want to debunk and refute false origins positions like evolution, naturalism, we also want to model build. And so we have a lot of content and material upholding the truth of biblical creation and offering a superior model in terms of ancestry. That would be the biblical model of ancestry. And so I want to run through the various websites and avenues that you can find this endless content, as it really is. And so we've put a lot of work into giving you a platform, a ministry just in general that is and can be a one-stop shop for all things origins, theology, soteriology, and so on. And so you can start with the official Standing for Truth Ministries website. That would be standingfortruthministries.com. It'll take you here, and there is just a ton here in terms of videos, debates, clips, answering your questions, articles, links to our books, and so on. So what I've done is right at the top of the website is I've added a multiple topics addressed. And so what you can do is click that. It'll take you to a separate section. And what you can do is utilize this section of the website where I've added quite a few videos answering common questions and challenges, and not so common ones as well. And so if you go to this section, you'll find plenty of videos and answering questions pertaining to just about everything in the world of Christianity and origins. So, for example, scientific evidence for biblical Noah, Did man live to 900? Did Jesus claim to be God? What about the tens of thousands of species in just 4,500 years? Don't creationists believe in hyperevolution? What's funny too, and you'll see we discuss this in our number of videos, articles, and books, when you actually examine under the hood, when you look to what's going on in terms of the genetic content, right? You have genotype, phenotype representing the physical characteristics or traits of the biological organism, genotype reflecting the genetic content. Okay. When we look to the genetic content, what's going on under the hood, what you see in terms of these new variations or new species, if that's what you want to call them, are typically reductions in allelic variability. You have shifts in what's called heterozygosity to homozygosity. That's a state of more genetic diversity or more allelic variability to a state of lesser genetic diversity, which is homozygosity. Okay. And this is what young Earth creation scientists would predict in terms of the changes and the variations, how they would come about. Because as creationists, we look back to the creation event and the flood bottleneck, and we see the expansion of genetic variability. God creates the original created kinds with internal genetic diversity. And with that pre-existing diversity or created heterozygosity, organisms starting off in a state of DNA diversity, they can vary, they can adapt. So we don't need millions of years to accumulate the necessary genetic variation through mutations, deleterious mutation accumulation, to explain these changes, to explain these variations. Those DNA differences are front loaded at the start, and now you can see visible change in just a single generation because of genetic processes like recombination. You get these DNA variants shuffled every generation, gene conversion. In terms of speciation, all you need is breakaway populations, isolation, inbreeding, shifts in heterozygosity to homozygosity, and you get these kinds of variations that we see. And so it's very easy to explain the tens of thousands of species that we see today. The question for the evolutionists is, why don't we see more? Because we understand now that change can come about quickly, especially if that variability is already built in. So the point I'm trying to make here is you'll find as you go through these number of challenges, look into the answers that we provide, the real challenge is actually for the evolutionist, the proponent of large scale evolution. They're issuing the challenge. They say a lot of these challenges preclude evolution. Preclude means makes it impossible. And yet you'll find that the biblical creationists have the best answers, right? We look back to the creation event, we see the expansion of genetic information. Evolutionists look back to their creation event, quote unquote, and they see the contraction of genetic information because billions of years ago, what does their model say? Well, non-living chemicals managed to sort themselves out, evolve into the first self-replicating molecule, the first self-replicating cell. From there, you get multi-celled evolution, right? Single to multi-celled evolution. Then you get fish. That fish crawls out of the water. You get amphibians, reptiles, mammals, eventually man. Okay. Well, these are uphill changes. These are vertical, large scale changes. How do you add the type of complexity that would be required to take your particles to people? Single celled like ancestors into whales, humans, into all life, including plants and animals. That requires massive increases in true phenotypic complexity. We don't see that. We see change, yes, but the change that we see is consistent, and it's exactly what a biblical creationist would expect, which is why you'll find going through all this material that the biblical creation model of ancestry best accounts for the data. We're the ones making the best testable predictions. We're the ones with the most impressive retrodictions. Okay. Explaining data that we have, but also making future testable predictions based on things we don't really know. Okay. And this is how science works. And so you'll find, again, comprehensive answers, thorough answers to just about everything related to the flood, origins, ancestry, theology, the deity of Christ, end times theology, explaining the problem of evil, suffering. Is Tiktaalik a transitional fossil? So take advantage, guys. There's a lot there. And you can also look to the left and you'll find numerous categories. So evidence for separate ancestry, young earth creation, geology, biblical creation basics, Christian apologetics, categories like endogenous retroviruses. So you'll see proponents of evolution, they'll frequently argue that endogenous retroviruses, that's the best evidence for evolution. Creationists can't address it. Well, we've got a whole section on it. We've got entire sections on what they say are the so-called best lines of evidence for evolution. Now, if you refresh and go back to the video section and scroll to the bottom, what I've put here for people is guests on Standing for Truth. And so these are a large number of the guests that we've had on the channel. And these comprise experts of all kinds. We've got geologists in here, biologists, theologians, Christian apologists. Okay. We've got astrophysicists. We've got all kinds of specialties here that'll touch on the most important topics related to the ongoing origins debate. And so you can go in here, for example, pick a guest. Here's Michael J. Ord. Very well-rounded, one of my favorite flood researchers. And you'll find his programs here with us: the Grand Canyon, Green River Formation, flood boundaries, rapid formation of caves, the Ice Age, so on and so forth. So pick your guest and utilize the content that we have from them. Dr. Frank Turek, excellent Christian apologist. You'll find good general answers to the question, why Christianity? Of all the religions, why Christianity? And so you'll find answers to questions related to fields in biology, geology, genetics, astrophysics, astronomy. For example, Dr. Jason Lyle here, who's been a tremendous blessing to the ongoing defense of biblical creation. You'll find his programs here with us, as well as the clips that have resulted from those programs. They're always comprehensive. And so we get answers to distant starlight, dating methods, James Webb Space Telescope, Big Bang Theory, so on and so forth. So again, lots of excellent guests here. Take advantage, guys. Utilize the material that we have on the main website. This is our primary website. We've just released a couple new articles. And so in the article section, you can see many articles, but the three newest ones are: one, the human genome confirms biblical creation or biblical history. I go into the mitochondrial DNA that points us right back to one woman, but in terms of haplogroups, your three major haplogroups, L, M, and N, that could very well represent who? Noah's three daughters-in-law, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, their three wives. In this article, I address the critics. I go into Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson's three-node model, the L, M, and N model, in terms of mitochondrial DNA phylogenetics, and also refute objections. And so do check that out, guys. Just another reason, another example of it being a truly amazing time to be a biblical creationist, guys. There's just so much evidence. We've partnered with Dr. Jerry Bergman here on these two new articles. Can scales be converted into feathers? Lizards evolving placentas. What? Really? And so these are a couple of the more prominent examples over the last few years that have been presented. Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal has presented these numerous times in numerous debates. And so these have been answered, they've been engaged, and please check it out. It's important that we all stay as up to date as possible as we can on all things creation, evolution, origins, and ancestry. We want to utilize the best arguments against the critics. We want to engage all challenges. We want to answer all objections. And so it's important that we do just that. We don't want to pretend that the critics don't exist. We know they exist, and we want to interact with their material, interact with their challenges in a comprehensive, a professional, and sophisticated manner. And so you guys will be fascinated by the data and explanations in these two technical articles. They really do show, including this one, lizards evolving placentas, the great variety in God's amazing designs. And you can access those right here, as well as a number of other articles and the Standing for Truth Ministries blog, where you can find several more articles, posts, and I will be putting out a lot of articles. I'm working on several right now in 2025 on origins related topics. Now, what's interesting about the lizards' so-called evolution of placentas is you'll find the variety of reproductive designs in lizards that evolutionists assume, oh, these must be evolving. And it's akin to what we see in the design world. For example, GM might build a variety of vehicles where some have just an air conditioner. Some, like your manual cars, oftentimes, especially older vehicles, don't have any air conditioner. Some vehicles have an air conditioner and a heater. Okay. And as time goes on, the air conditioner could break down and all you have is the heater, or the heater could break down and all you have is the air conditioner. Or you drive a vehicle in primarily Alaska, a cold environment, and the air conditioner, due to lack of use, breaks down, no longer works. Okay. Because typically in a cold environment like that, you're utilizing the heat. Or maybe you're in a desert, like a hot environment where you're not using the heater, and over time, because you're not using it, it breaks down. Okay. A lot of times with these examples of design, if they're not being used or utilized, they'll break down for lack of use. Okay. And that's what you see in these various lizard species, is you see that there are a variety of reproductive designs, and it shows, for example, here, when one is functional, there appears, in most cases at least, no reason for natural selection to select for the other competing reproductive system. Lastly, there was no evidence in the research reviewed above of lizards evolving placentas, but rather much evidence of not only intelligent design, but also over-design. What that's saying is, over time, one reproductive mode might be lost in favor of another one. Okay. And so the evolutionists look at these variety of designs, and rather than explaining the observation in the obvious manner that one mode is being lost, they'll say that one mode is evolving or being added through large scale evolutionary processes. Notice this: it is possible that some lizard types had the capacity for both reproductive modes, but lost one or the other type in history. Evolutionists don't generally consider this possibility because it is a process of information loss or degradation, which does not support microbes to microbiologists' upward trending model of evolution. The so-called alligators evolving feathers. That's the other article that we just put out. And if you look at that one, that's just another example of the limitations in the wild in real time for natural selection and evolution. That's this one here. Can scales be converted into feathers? So check both articles out. Those are our two newest ones, but there are plenty of other ones for you to check out as well. Now, if you go back to the homepage and scroll down just a little bit, you'll find a couple of articles here that you can enjoy. For example, refuting the critics on arguments against genetic entropy, nested hierarchies. But there's a couple sites here as well that'll take you access points to our other websites. So you click this one, this will take you to JB Natural Skincare, which my wife runs. And you can find all kinds of natural, organic, handcrafted products. And you can't go wrong with these body butters, the oils, the serums, the best nature has to offer, which fits beautifully in with our worldview here of biblical creation. And so again, you can find body butters, body care, cleansers, masks, serums. And what I love about it too is you can find a number of positive testimonials, reviews, a blog, and answering a lot of the most common questions. Where do you source your ingredients? Is it safe to use your products during pregnancy, for example? And so you can utilize this website and get all the information that you need, discover the various benefits of the products, magnesium oil, for example, especially in the winter. I know here in Canada, dry hands are common, but the body butters right here, you utilize this, it goes a long way too. You get a little bit just on your fingertip, and it's very moisturizing, very healing. And a bottle, a container goes a long way. Goes a long way. So you can find all these here. And again, right from the main website, will take you to this website where you can have a look at all the different products. There's always special offers going on as well. Our other page here, the Standing for Truth Patron. So Standing for Truth Patreon account, which will take you here. And this is another one-stop shop for all. Okay. How I've organized this is I've added a lot of material, but a lot of material on specific questions, challenges, specific topics. Okay. And so that way, if you just want to quickly find an answer to something, you can come to the search bar and you can type, let's say ERVs. You can click ERVs and there's going to be a ton of content answering questions related to ERVs. Okay. Maybe you're looking for something on chromosome 2 fusion, another one of their favorite arguments. Chromosome fusion. Okay. There's some content on that. You name it, it should be there. Maybe you want something on end times theology. So here's some videos, mix, articles. There's a lot of posts here for you guys to enjoy. So Patreon is a great way to find very quickly an answer to a topic, a challenge, a question. What's something else? Genetic entropy. And there's several videos, articles on most of these topics. Okay. Soteriology, maybe you want an answer to a challenge passage like James 2. So here's a program I did with Matt Powell on once saved, always saved. A lot of videos debunking the critics. So this is just to say, utilize the Patreon account. Every single day I'm putting out more and more posts. Here, what were Behemoth and Leviathan, Science Confirmed Scripture, Daniel 70th week, new article releases. So just a little bit of everything. The Trinity. Utilize the Patreon account. And also, we're a listener supported ministry, doing this full time, putting out a lot of content, daily content. We got a lot of active research projects behind the scenes, working on several books. And so a lot of people reach out through email, messenger, text, and ask, how can they help us at Standing for Truth Ministries? A great way to help us is becoming a patron, becoming a ministry partner. And as a ministry partner or a patron, you can help us continue what we're doing. Give us suggestions, recommendations of projects, videos, articles that you'd like to see us put out, topics and challenges you'd like to see us engage and tackle. We're always looking for new challenges, new objections to engage, new questions to answer. Okay. And I've made it easy here because for as little as $1 a month, you can be a Standing for Truth ministry partner, and it greatly benefits us. It really does. And it's going to help us with doing everything we'd like to do, accomplishing all the goals that we have for 2025. Most of the content on Patreon is available to the public because I want to make this material. I want to have all the answers available for people to utilize, but there is also some exclusive Patreon material as well. So going back to the homepage, you can check out the Patreon page, JB Naturals, and our Creationist Clothing page. So several sites, unique sites associated with Standing for Truth Ministries, and you can find and look through the various collections that we have. The famous Evolutionist Tears mug. No better way to start your morning, to start your day with a nice, hot, fresh cup of organic Evolutionist Tears. And I know my evolutionist friends have a good sense of humor. So, of course, that's not going to bother them. All of our Standing for Truth emblem shirts, sweaters, again, mugs, our created heterozygosity line of clothing, mugs, SFT gear in general, pond scum to people, great shirt to wear out, maybe at the gym, de-evolution, spark some conversations, some edifying conversations on origins, hopefully bring up the gospel. So again, do check out Creationist Clothing, Patreon, JB Naturals, and all of these can be accessed from our main page. Down here, we've got many questions. Right here, I've got a dedication to my brother, Travis Budinsky, who, without him, leading me to the truth, leading me to the gospel so many years ago, I never would have became a Christian, and I wouldn't be here running a full-time ministry, Standing for Truth Ministries, answering every challenge and answering all objections to the Christian faith. And so praise the Lord. He puts people in our lives, puts people in our paths in order to bring us to him and ultimately to the saving gospel message of Jesus Christ. And so if you keep going down here, guys, you will find, well, firstly, our books, where you can get our books online through Amazon. But right here is a section I really want you guys to utilize and check out: refuting and answering common questions and arguments. And so right on the side, on the right side here, you'll find a number of the most common questions related to origins. And it's very accessible because it's right here on the home page. And let me refresh this just to make sure we're getting as much of the material as possible. And so you'll find answers to questions like the flood boundary. What about the heat problem? Neanderthals? Did birds evolve from dinosaurs? Is there evidence for a literal Adam and Eve? Debunking various critics like Aaron Ross, Simon Dan. What about carbon dating? Pseudogenes, bacteria, viruses. So again, answers to just about everything. And I've put this here just to make it easy and accessible for people who are seeking out answers. Again, we want to be a one-stop shop for all. And if you're invested at all in the origins debate, you're going to want to utilize the material here. If you're into debates, I know debates are important. Debates are edifying. It gets us out of our theological, our scientific echo chambers. brings us into the debate coliseum or the debate dojo, where we can duke it out spiritually. We can have good professional discussions. And for the audience, these debates are important. They are edifying because it allows you to be objective. It allows you to hopefully see good representations of various positions and examine these debates in your seeking of the truth. I know the various positions I hold to, I largely came to them through debates, through discussions, because it's the best way to see a representation of various views and see how they defend those views. You know, they say you might feel like you're right. You might be confident you're right until you're in a discussion or a debate with someone who disagrees with you and you're cross-examined. And that's a good thing. Don't shy away from it, because what it does is it challenges your views. It helps you to improve your view, change your view if you have to. It helps with model building, see what needs to be engaged, what areas need to be improved upon. But it also helps with critical thinking skills. I find it helps with rapid note-taking skills. As you're constantly, as a good debater, you should be taking a lot of notes. I take a lot of notes directly on the computer, but you can do it in a notepad as well, based on what your interlocutor is saying. It helps with listening skills, right? Listen to understand. So too many times I see people in debates, they're listening to respond. How am I going to respond? What's going to be my good rebuttal? Am I going to say something slick? Okay, which I get, there's a time and place for all that. But try and listen to understand. So you're talking with somebody, and it's someone of a differing view on whatever position is being debated, let's say creation, evolution. Listen to understand, ask clarifying questions. Is this what you mean? I think this is how I understand what you're saying. And then now that you have everything you need, you can respond, and you can respond accordingly. And so debates, again, they are very beneficial, not only for the audience, but for those that are debating, because they help improve what? Critical thinking skills, listening skills, note-taking skills, and it also helps you to come to a better understanding of these various viewpoints. Okay. So that's why we've got a lot of different categories here on debates: dispensationalism debates, eschatology debates, millennium debates, creation versus evolution, soteriology. So a lot of material and content on just about everything in the world of Christian apologetics, creation, evolution, origin, soteriology, eschatology. So make sure to utilize it. For example, maybe you're just a big fan of soteriology. You can go into the soteriology section and find short videos, debates, long form shows as well, answering various questions and challenges. I've tried to make this as comprehensive as possible, guys. You can also check out our Defending Genesis conferences. And so I've hosted 2 of these Defending Genesis conferences, one in 2022, one in 2023, and both are up here. This is our 2023 conference, 2 programs a day for 5 days, so 10 events. And comprehensive, because each event runs about 2 hours, 2+ hours. 2023 was an excellent conference, very memorable, and we had a good variety of speakers, touched on the Trinity. John Mackay and Joe Hubbard from Creation Research gave a fantastic presentation, from boomerangs to Babel and back. And so again, utilize all of the content that we have, guys, and a good place to start would be the homepage, because from here you can find quick answers to questions and challenges, and you can do that by going to our questions and challenges section. You can go to our Patreon, which, as I demonstrated, has a lot of answers and good material there for you to utilize, enjoy, and absorb in terms of the information. Our Creatious Clothing website, and JB Naturals, where you can shop and have a look at all of those awesome products. And so, okay, guys, that was about it for the Standing for Truth Ministries website. Just to emphasize a lot of the books that you can find, we've written I think, about 15 or 16 books as a ministry. And so for those that are looking for comprehensive answers to various topics like endogenous retroviruses, you can grab this book, which is about 200 pages just on endogenous retroviruses. It really just gets into all the details and dismantles one of the evolutionists' favorite arguments. I've got a comprehensive book, 300 plus pages on all things end times theology, dawn of the Antichrist, special creation, updated and expanded, and I'm working on another updated and expanded version as well. So this one touches on just about everything, guys. I have a copy right in front of me. Special creation, dismantling evolution, confirming independent origins. And this book touches on, again, just about everything related to ancestry. It gets into hominins, endogenous retroviruses, junk DNA, chromosome 2 fusion. It gets into the scientific evidence for Adam and Eve. And so that book is in many ways a go-to book for those who just want one place, one book where you can get answers to just about everything. And you can go through the rest of the material we have here. In terms of published books, like the Young Earth Creation Model by Matt, my ministry partner, Destroying Aaron Ra's Flood series. Those are some of our classic books that we wrote and had a lot of fun writing years ago. And so again, JB Naturals, Krish's Clothing, our official website, and the Patreon. And so now what I want to do is enter the second part of our show. I wanted that walkthrough, though, to be comprehensive because I want that go-to video for people who are interested in what we have to offer at the ministry. This will be that video you can pass around to your friends, to your family, maybe people new to the origins debate. Maybe they're new Christians. You can show them this video, and then that way they'll know where to go to get what they need. And we want to make it accessible and easy for people as well. But again, we are a ministry that likes to leave no stone unturned, and therefore it's inevitable that we're going to have a lot of different videos, articles, books. And so I want to keep it as organized as possible for you guys. Of course, we have our YouTube channels as well, the Standing For Truth channel and also the Young Earth Creation channel. And so here is the next section of this video. This largely focuses on a response from Dr. Stefan Frello. This right here is an article I recently put out. The Human Genome Confirms Biblical History. Your three major haplogroups, all this data suggesting that all mitochondrial DNA worldwide goes back to a single woman in general, as we really only have few DNA differences in this uniparentally inherited DNA compartment. Okay, it's passed down on the female side. Did a whole many presentations on mitochondrial DNA. But the point of this article is showing how all these DNA differences can be traced back to three major haplogroups and how those nodes, L, M, and N, could represent Noah's three daughters-in-law. Now, in a video that I recently put out, I'm working on part 2 for that video. It's a massive debunking of the critics. In that video, I refuted Dr. Stefan Frello, but through Dr. Stefan Frello, I engaged arguments from people like Dr. Dan Stern-Cardinal and many other of the PhD scientists like Dr. Herman Mays that are using a lot of these same arguments. Then I went into a video by Grayson Hawk, and I refuted him on genetic entropy, but more specifically on this argument that says there's just too many alleles. There are these exceptions to the rules where you have dozens or hundreds of alleles that could not have come about in just thousands of years, according to the biblical creation model. So I addressed that in detail. Anyways, Stefan Frello put out a response, not really a response, on Facebook. You know, Facebook, you'll notice Facebook is where you get all the keyboard warriors, the keyboard ninjas. It's where all the keyboard Karens like to come out and play. those that you never see, join our endless open mic challenges to actually be cross-examined and have a healthy discussion on these topics. And so, two of his arguments that he made. One was a straw man, which I did address in my article and the video, but it was engaged in the sense that these critics will say, well, M and N could not have come from L. Okay, no, M and N did come from L, and L, M and N could not have been contemporaries. They could not have lived at the same time. So that's the argument I addressed in my video and article. Stefan Frello, other people have used this as well. He comes back in comments and he says, well, no, this is impossible because one of the three nodes, right? Because they're separated by mutations, and mutations reflect time and therefore generations. And so he says one of the three nodes has to be the great, great, great granddaughter of one of the others. Evograd, the way he explains it in his article series critiquing Dr. Jensen's Replacing Darwin book, he says great, 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 great times like something like 60 or something, if I remember correctly. Anyways, this was answered in my video by answering this objection here, that M and N had to come from L. I pointed out how Genesis describes very long lifespans in the pre-flood world, and there'd be a lot of overlap. There'd be a lot of unique things going on in the pre-flood world, okay? But more specifically, to engage this exact assertion, because that's what it is, and it's a straw man, is firstly, when you look at the phylogenetic tree, these branches, these lines represent DNA differences, okay? Yes, these are mutations in people groups over time, but the assumption is that the size of the branch, if it's a longer branch, they're going to say it represents more time, right? Some of these lines here go out way further than others, some of these African branches. So they say, well, that means they must go back tens of thousands of years. Okay, this is where they get their out of Africa model. And so they say the mutations here go back further than just 4,500 years or 6,000 years. Okay, but again, that's where they go wrong. This is why this challenge is largely based on a straw man. And so I have here the branch lengths of the mitochondrial DNA phylogenetic tree reflect what? DNA differences. These differences are the result of mutations. Mutations are transmitted per generation. This is why, for example, if you're looking at a Y chromosome family tree, okay, and the mitochondrial DNA family tree, you'll see differing branch sizes. Like in the mitochondrial DNA tree in the HVR haplogroup, most common in Europe, you'll find some branches larger than other branches, suggesting that some people are picking up more mutations in the same amount of time than their cousins. So mutation rates are variable is the point. Okay, some rates in certain people groups or like hominins, like Neanderthals, could have been faster. We're going to get into that a little bit. Or with Neanderthals on the paternal side, the Y chromosome. Okay. Well, if men are living to extremely long ages, what you're going to have is what's called patriarchal drive. Where in a single generation, like Noah, his three sons, they could have been hit with just a ton of mutations because fathers are having kids at older ages. So more mutations are going to be passed on. So a larger line could represent just a short amount of time, but a lot of mutations that are being passed on. Okay. So notice this: Genesis 5 lists the paternal generations between the creation event and the flood. Very few generations passed. So it's not just many, many generations. Okay. Where one of the three nodes has to be the great, 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 great granddaughter of one of the others. Remember, the nodes represent possibly, that's the model, Noah's three daughters-in-law. No, according to Genesis 5, the paternal generations are listed. There's very few generations. Now, you have very few generations, but you have very long lifespans in the pre-flood world and the immediate post-flood world. Well, what does that mean? you're going to have a lot of generational overlap in the pre-flood world. Okay, so 3 important things here: few generations, long lifespans, and late childbearing ages of the biblical patriarchs. We've only got about 10 generations that have passed in those roughly 16 or 1700 years. Now, since men were living long, hundreds of years, it would be safe to say that the maternal line would be the same, that women are also living a long time. Okay? So both paternal and maternal lineages would be expected to have long lifespans. Therefore, L, M, and N could have been contemporaries, because that's why they're separated by short lines. Notice here. This is the L, M, and N haplogroups, okay? 3 major haplogroups. The lines are short. That means there's only a few DNA differences separating those. The lines radiating out from them are long, representing more mutations. Okay. Well, with fewer generations in the pre-flood world, longer lifespans, more generations and more time in the post-flood world, how this tree looks, the reflection of it, fits beautifully. Where you have the lines connecting L, M, and N representing what? Pre-flood time, pre-flood mutations. The lines radiating out representing post-flood time, post-flood history. For example, the R haplogroup could represent a post-Babel dispersal event. Okay, so this actually fits perfectly. So no, M and N did not have to come from L. They could have, but when you actually consider the biblical story in the account in Genesis, long lifespans, generational overlap, just a few generations, all this fits perfectly because the lines separating L, M, and N are short. The lines radiating out from them are long. And this fits beautifully with what we know about the pre-flood and post-flood world. So right here is a counter, a very easy counter to what Stefan Frello is saying here. So he's going to have to go back to the drawing board on that one. Now, here's the thing. When you bring in fossil sequences like Neanderthals, they diverge. They're a lot different than extant humans. They're an exception, okay? They're an interesting people group. In my massive debunking of the critics, I must have spent at least 20, 25 minutes on just Neanderthals explaining why they're different. Okay. It's funny because a lot of these critics, they'll say, oh, Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, he doesn't even consider Neanderthal DNA. He just ignores it. If you look at this tree, yeah, it fits nicely, they'll say, without Neanderthal DNA, showing that they're not up to date on the literature. They're not digging deep. They're not actually reading what we have to say on the issues. They're just repeating talking points that they've heard from people. Because you can go right into his 2015 paper right here, and you can see that the Neanderthal sequences are considered. And yeah, they have long branches because there's more mutations there. They're different. But the question is, why are they different? Well, I went into a number of reasons why. Okay. For sake of time, I'm not going to do it again. Go watch my part 1, massive debunking of the critics. Part 2, which I'm nearly complete, I'm hoping to record this weekend. It will be engaging in detail Dr. Dan Stern-Cardinal's hierarchies and unconstrained genetic sequences. That's largely what part 2 is going to focus on. Okay. And so notice this: Neanderthals could have been founded by a biblical patriarch in his extremely old age, which means subsequent generations of Neanderthals would pass on a ton of new mutations that on a phylogenetic tree would look like long periods of time, when in fact they only represent a few generations. Just because you see really long branches or a lot of mutations or a few mutations, it doesn't necessarily equate to the kind of time that evolutionists want to assume. Okay. Mutations in the mitochondrial DNA would be inherited from the founding population, plus the new mutations arising after the bottleneck. If it's a single mitochondrial DNA lineage, any mutations inherited or passed on to progeny would have identical loci. There will exist a what? A unique mitochondrial DNA compartment when compared to outside populations. Neanderthal populations and outside populations not associated with Neanderthals are expected to be different, even a lot different. And also remember, Neanderthals and other hominins like Heidelbergensis, Denisovans, they were closer to the flood and therefore closer to creation. So right off the bat, they would be different. Today, we have extant humans, these people groups, okay, largely either they assimilated or largely due to inbreeding, isolation, they could have gone extinct, which means you have thousands of years after the Tower of Babel dispersal for humans to continue accumulating genetic diversity and changing. Okay. Anyways, I got a whole section of that on my book, Special Creation. But what I wanted to refute was Stefan Frello's attempt to debunk this. So this is Stefan Frello. This is his argument on Facebook. He says Neanderthals and Denisovans and Homo heidelbergensis, which are not mentioned. See, Homo heidelbergensis could have been early stage Neanderthal, okay, before Neanderthal became as inbred as it did. Okay, just needed drink of water there. And so Frello, he argues that us creationists, we can't account for the differences in these hominins in the biblical time frame. Okay. He says highest difference between two modern humans, 120, which I've explained, easy in biblical time, the mitochondrial genome, okay, which is haploid. It doesn't have a chromosomal counterpart. The mitochondrial chromosome has very few differences, low diversity. There's a fast mutation rate. And contrary to what many evolutionists say, your nearly neutral, your neutral mutation rate equals the fixation rate. Okay, over long periods of time, evolutionary time, you have fixation equilibrium. Notice this. Why does the mutation rate equal the fixation rate? The mutation rate equals the fixation rate for neutral mutations because, and then they explain why. So this is not contested, guys. Okay, and I've written with Chris Roop an extensive technical paper going back easily over a year now, going into the many reasons why this argument from militant critics that says, oh, well, the substitution rate and the mutation rate, or the per generation rate and the accumulation rate, they're so different. And creationists, they can't account for the phylogenetic rate, which is a lot slower. No, again, it's very clear. Fatuma, he said it equals the fixation rate. A lot of mutations are lost, yes, but a lot of mutations are not lost. Like today, there's 8 billion people. If you want to look at diploid genomes, right? We're diploid. We get 2 sets, one from mom, one from dad. Okay. And we get about 100 new mutations per person per generation. With 8 billion people, that's 800 billion new mutations. That's a lot of mutations. So yeah, a lot of mutations are lost, but there's still a lot of mutations. There's a lot of rare mutations as well that are spreading throughout the population. According to the evolutionary model, it's not until recent times that the population has expanded. They'll say the invention of agriculture, people start spreading out, people survive better, people grow more, the populations are a lot larger. But for most of evolutionary history, you have what? Population crashes, population surges, these bottlenecks. You have populations of about 10,000, 30,000, very small populations. You have a lot of inbreeding, isolation, faster rates of fixation. That's why everything balances out. But the problem for the evolutionists is what they say are strictly neutral are actually nearly neutral. That's why they need the majority of the genome to be junk in order that these mutations can be strictly neutral. because once they admit that they're nearly neutral, they're slightly deleterious, but selection still can't see them. What that means is they spread. Selection can't see. Yeah, selection can remove your biggest mutations, your most harmful mutations. Okay. But most mutations don't negatively affect reproduction. It has to be a pretty big mutation to stop people from reproducing. It takes a lot to prevent people from living and reproducing and passing on their genes. Okay, yeah, a single point mutation could kill someone. There's not going to be reproduction, so reproduction stopped. But the point is, most mutations are nearly neutral. They spread, selection can't see them. They're subject to genetic drift. And that's why selection doesn't really do a good job at altering your mutation rate and your fixation rate or substitution rate. Okay, species-wide change, the rate as to which mutations accumulate in the population. Okay, fixation just means being stuck in place, a change that becomes fixed. Okay, in the entire population. And so, yes, your mutation rate equals the fixation rate. And according to evolution, there's an equilibrium. Things balance out because, yes, today there's no fixation because the population's huge. People are spread out over the entire planet. And so it's slow. But for most of evolutionary history, that wasn't the case. And that is why your mutation rate equals the fixation rate. That is why evolution is precluded by this fact. Because guess what? Every time you have a slightly deleterious mutation that's fixed, that's stuck in place, that's species-wide damage that selection can't do anything about. That is irreversible and irreparable damage, species or population-wide. Now, in haploid chromosomes, haploid genomes like the mitochondrial DNA or the Y chromosome, your mutation rate also equals the fixation rate. And that is why when we point out that your mutation rate takes mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome Noah back just a few thousand years ago, their argument that, well, you're looking at the mutation rate and not the fixation rate. That doesn't work because, again, the mutation rate equals the fixation rate. And I could talk about that all day, but the arguments, they've been addressed. The counters, they've been addressed. Now, when it comes to Frello's argument about Neanderthals having too many mutations, what he misses is the fact that all you need is a lot more mutations in a short amount of time accumulating. We know Neanderthals lived in some harsh conditions. Yes, later stage Neanderthal was highly inbred. They were 40% less fit than modern humans. They lived in harsh environments. They're adapted very significantly to those cold ecoglacial environments. We know environment can dictate phenotype. Okay. But they were highly inbred. One of the most homozygous human populations that ever existed. There are runs of homozygosity, these massive stretches of identical letters. That's homozygosity. They're massive. Okay. But we know that these conditions that they were associated with, for example, in the flood, what you have during the flood is a lot of energy produced, a lot of heat, a lot of radiation. And so what you would have immediately after the flood is radiation rocks. And you'd have a lot of these isolated, what they call hominins, these people groups, either before Babel or after Babel. They spread out, maybe as a small family, become isolated in an area. This includes caves. Caves have more radiation as well. Those rocks give off more. And as a result, increases mutation rates. Notice this. Do radiation rocks increase mutation rates? Yes. That's why we're not going to overturn the rule with the exceptions. As Dr. Jensen points out, the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosomal DNA, they fit perfectly with the biblical creation model. Then you have a couple interesting people groups like Neanderthals, Denisovans, Heidelbergensis that existed in very unique conditions unlike any conditions today. So what do we have here? Radiation rocks, which contain radioactive elements, can increase mutation rates in organisms exposed to them, as the radiation emitted can directly damage DNA, leading to what? Genetic mutations. Okay, this includes in somatic cells, which those mutations are not passed on, like your skin cell, for example. It has to occur in your reproductive cells, your germ cells. Both compartments would be accumulating more mutations. As a result, more are being passed on. And so you can explain the DNA differences in Neanderthals, Heidelbergensis, and Denisovans because of these immediate post-flood factors. Okay, they could have had damaged DNA repair enzymes as well, which result in more mutations accumulating. Yes, you can have a population of Neanderthals that become inbred, but start off hypermutating. Also, your hypermutation could affect your uniparentally inherited DNA compartments, like your Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA, while the increases in homozygosity due to inbreeding and isolation are affecting your biparentally inherited DNA. And you can't really see the hypermutation in the biparentally or autosomal DNA because it's masked by the inbreeding. But you could have the hypermutation in your uniparentally inherited DNA compartments. But all you need is, at first, these groups, which they're different, Heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, Denisovans, okay, they could start off hypermutating and then become or shift towards being highly inbred, 40% less fit. This all fits like a glove. We have a good answer. Notice this. Can living in caves increase mutation rates? A lot of these people groups, this was the rekindling of culture and civilization after the flood. So we know Neanderthals lived in caves. A lot of these so-called hominins lived in caves. That would increase mutation rates as well. I love how the critics like to point to what they call the heat and radiation problem, but then don't even realize the heat, the energy, the radiation, the leftover remnants of it. It is a feature, not a bug, for many reasons, but also in explaining a lot of the diversity, the divergence in these interesting people groups. Notice this. Yes, living in caves can potentially increase the mutation rate in organisms due to factors like reduced selection pressure against slightly deleterious mutations, exposure to certain chemicals or radiation within the cave environment, and what did I say earlier? Potentially altered DNA repair mechanisms adapted to the unique cave conditions. So I would predict that when we get genomes and DNA data of Homo naledi, I'll even say Homo floresiensis, that's an islander, okay? These isolated populations, these populations that lived in caves, they had altered DNA repair enzymes. They were hypermutating because of their environment being one of the major factors, okay? They say it right here. And so examples of cave-dwelling organisms with adaptations related to potential increased mutation rates. So no, mutation rates are variable, and your immediate post-flood conditions due to the radiation, due to the radiation rocks, negative and harmful and harsh environmental conditions. Notice this. Did ancient humans live in harsh environmental conditions? Yes, ancient humans lived in harsh environmental conditions. Okay, they lived in the cold, extremely cloudy, lack of vitamin D. That'd be harsh on the body, lack of nutrients. Again, all of this would contribute to unique genomes of these human subgroups that are no longer here today. Again, either assimilated or each went extinct for whatever reasons. But it's no surprise that their genomes are different. Okay, so again, can living in caves increase mutation rates? Yes. Do radiation rocks increase mutation rates? Yes. So that's my hypothesis, and it works. That's my hypothesis, and it works. We have the data. Those rocks, those caves would have a lot of radiation. They'd have the necessary factors to increase temporarily the mutation rates of these people groups to where today, yeah, they're a lot different than extant humans. Okay, notice this. More supporting evidence, right from what? The conventional literature. Hypermutation and reality. Here we analyze the genome-wide sequences of almost 22,000 families with rare genetic diseases and identified 12 individuals with a hypermutated genome with between 2 and 7 times more de novo single nucleotide variants than expected. Anyways, here's the most important part. You have excess mutations from the father. 2 families had genetic drivers of germline. So this is germline, not just somatic. Hypermutation. It's a reality, guys. Dr. Frello and these other anti-creationists, their challenges, they don't withstand scrutiny. They have answers. With fathers carrying damaging genetic variation in what? DNA repair genes. That's what I've been saying. Okay, so you have these damaged DNA repair genes. You have radiation rocks. These people groups are living in caves right after the flood, unique situations, harmful environmental conditions. Of course, they're going to be different genetically when comparing to extant humans, guys. This is not a surprise, but this shows how desperate those that believe they're related to banana plants, whales, and strawberries are to counter the data that so powerfully confirms, so overwhelmingly confirms biblical creation. Okay, they don't want to tap out. So what they have to do is look to these challenges that they think are good, strong challenges, but we have sufficient answers. They're not challenges that preclude young earth creation, put it that way. And notice this, 5 of the families, they were exposed to chemotherapeutic agents before conception, which probably was a key driver in hypermutation. Exactly. You have these external drivers of hypermutation, and those external factors is what we'd expect in that immediate post-flood world in people groups that branched off from the main population either before Babel or after Babel. They became isolated and genetically damaged for many reasons, including the inbreeding. Notice this. Environmental exposure in parents, such as ionizing radiation, can influence the number of mutations transmitted to offspring. So yes, early after the flood, you had some people groups that branched off, maybe a single small family. Okay. And unfortunately, they lived in less than ideal conditions. They were subject to radiation rocks, caves, and parents passed on a ton of mutations to their offspring. Notice this, even today, we also found that the overall point mutation rate is significantly higher in Africans than in Europeans in this specific region. We can extrapolate that to other regions as well in light of everything that we know. Look at this, right from the conventional literature, guys. Our findings imply that defects in DNA repair genes can increase germline mutation rates. And that's what happened with people groups like Neanderthals, Denisovans, Heidelbergensis. They were subject to harsh and less than ideal environmental conditions, including radiation rocks, caves, damaged DNA repair enzymes. They were highly inbred. They were isolated. All of these factors, okay, explain exactly why they are different. Okay. And it's interesting because both germline and somatic mutations. And it even says that DNA repair defects do not always behave similarly in the soma and the germline. So in the situations that a group like Neanderthal were suffering in, the factors like damaged DNA repair enzymes could have had a greater effect. They could have behaved differently and more negatively in the germline. And so the point is, Stefan Frello, your argument here about fossil sequences, okay, the Neanderthals, their divergence, none of this works. It has answers. We have answered it. I've answered it here. I've shown you right from the conventional literature. I've confirmed it with numerous sources. AI confirmed it. Okay. So yes, radiation rocks, the repair or the DNA repair enzymes that were damaged, the overall degeneration environment, and so on and so forth. All of those factors explain beautifully why Neanderthals, Heidelbergensis, and Denisovans were different genetically. And so, guys, with that, we are now over an hour. And so I appreciate everybody tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this video. That includes the walkthrough of Standing for Truth Ministries and our rebuttal to Dr. Stefan Frello. With that, Standing for Truth is out. God bless all.